Welcome to our latest policy webinar, and thank you for joining. Before we start today's presentation, I'm just going to touch on some housekeeping notes. Today's session will be recorded and we're aiming for it to last around an hour. If you do have any questions, please use the chat function and there will be an opportunity to ask some questions for a Q&A at the end. Unless speaking, we ask that mics are kept off, and we also recommend that cameras are turned off while presenting. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to turn on. So Dave, if you could just skip 2 slides. And on to the next.
Clear over that one, yeah.
So just go on to the next call, meet the team. On today's call, we have Dave Talbot, our Circuits Policy Manager, who will be presenting today, alongside Peter Toomey, our Planning and Policy Manager. From an ICE perspective, we have Hannah Sherratt and myself, Lottie Wheatcroft. We're always really keen to hear your feedback, and at the end of the presentation, there'll be a quick poll to understand how useful today has been, and we also welcome any comments. I'll now hand over to Dave.
All right, good morning, everybody. As the previous slide said, I'm the Circuits Policy Manager, so I cover overhead, underground, and parts of the operational policy. I'm senior authorised, and I also do standby. So just a little bit of background about myself. So today's presentation is all about updating you in the new Code of Practice 606. And the end of the presentation is to sort of cover why it's changing, what it looks like and what's changed, and how it should be used. So first of all, what is 606? It's the sort of policy that captures all the company operational procedures. It's on the secure website, which I believe you should have access to. And we're also going through the process of updating all our manuals into this new modern style format. So we're partway through that process. And at the start of the process, what we did was held a number of workshops in each of the areas to sort of, get feedback in terms of what was good, what was bad, what needed to be improved. And from that, we sort of, had a list of areas to focus on. And the next slide sort of covers the sort of main points that came out of the operational workshop, and that was to sort of bring up, the manual to a modernised style and bring it up to date. They were happy with the operational content of the manual, so they didn't really want to change that. The use of distribution safety rules definitions felt that should be used throughout the manual, so it aligned with the distribution safety rules. And also the review of the terms and references that are used throughout the policy to make sure that they're up to date as well. So, so bringing that manual up to date, what we wanted to do was communicate the information more clearly, to those that are using it, make it, like I say, clearer and consistent throughout the manual. Use of photographs, drawings, graphics where we could to aid understanding. You'll also notice that there's a strong use of the corporate branding in that the colours that we've used throughout the manual. And there's an improved style and format which makes it easier to sort of navigate and read. And for consistency, we've aligned it with the distribution safety rules, for the definitions, and made sure the references are all up to date. So if you look at the existing manual on the left-hand side, probably all familiar with the sections for overhead lines, cables, control, general, reports and switchgear and switching. And then if you look on the right-hand side, the new manual, essentially everything else in the main part of the manual moves across into the existing sections. And then we've added 2 new sections at the front, which is introduction and general requirements, and 2 new sections at the end of the manual, effectively, which we're still working on, which is the tools and equipment and the index. So if you want to find something a bit like a book, it's like a sort of an index, you know, to sort of locate something within the manual. So the amendment summary for the new manual starts at Amendment 48. So anything prior to that will be archived in the old manuals. The previous sections didn't have an amendment summary. So all the sections now, such as section A, B, etc., they will all have their own amendment summary as well as a main amendment summary. So anything that is updated in an existing procedure or a new procedure, they will be updated in those amendments also. And also we'll be sort of notifying people, you know, as things are updated. So there'll be an email sent out to all 606 holders, making them aware of what's been updated and when it's updated. Okay, so as I understand it, you've got access to the 606 and other documents through the secure website library area on the G81 policy. And if you're already registered, existing users can log in here. But if you need to register and get access, then new users can request access at this point on the website. Then if you wanted to search something within a document, most of you are probably familiar with the search function in a PDF document. In this case, you know, we put the word dead, so it will search the document for all those cases where dead appears in the document. So if you needed to find out something within the document where it was, it just helps you quickly, you know, sort of find something. So moving on to the new parts of the manual. So section 0 is the introduction. This is the first thing you need to look at in terms of who the manual's for, what the manual's for, a bit about risk assessment, how it's all structured, and more importantly, how to use it. We do use safety symbols throughout the manual, and so tools, equipment, electrical testing, and reporting of defects, which I'll come on to on the other side of the slide. So this is obviously for operational staff carrying out operational duties, and they're working to all our approved procedures. And these procedures within the manual constitute of the company's general risk assessment and control measures for carrying out operational activities. Within the section 0, it does cover about site-specific, you know, point of work risk assessments. So if there's a requirement to carry that out, that will be covered in the procedures. Safety symbols will be covered on the next slide. And if you are operating on the network and you come across a particular problem, there is a way of reporting any problems, defects with equipment. So again, that is available on the secure website. So there's a defect form to be completed, emailed to that email address, and that allows the policy manager to work with the manufacturer to look at that defect. And then it may need, you know, some modifications, you know, that need to be done. So that's just something in case you come across any problems. Also, the words distribution safety definitions are all in bold and capitalised throughout the procedures. So just moving on to the symbols that are used throughout the manual, which is all new. We've got hazard symbols on the left-hand side and PPE symbols on the right. These are all sort of to the British standards, so you should all be pretty well familiar with these. We're just concentrating on the hazard symbols. Each of the procedures, you know, sort of starts off with the safety section, which I'll cover. But if there's anything within the procedure where there's a particular hazard, you'll see this hazard warning symbol, and it'll detail what the particular hazard is. If there's anything within the procedure that it absolutely must be carried out, and just focus in mind that it's a mandatory requirement, absolutely must be carried out, that will be sort of the mandatory symbol. I think we're all been familiar with the first aid and the firefighting symbols. And then if there's anything we can add in terms of what's good practice, just to help, then there's a sort of advisory, good practice, thumbs up. On the right hand side, we've got the PPE symbols. familiar with a lot of these. Obviously, you've got helmet, arc resistant coveralls, etc. But they'll be used throughout the manual, and I'll give you some examples a little bit later on. So in section 1 and section 0, section 1 is the general requirements. So that's everything you need to do before carrying out work, before you actually start using a procedure. Okay, so that covers the general safety, electrical safety, health and hygiene, and it also covers the correct use of PPE. So there's a mandatory requirement for PPE when working in our substations or working operationally, such as coveralls, boots, glasses, cut-resistant gloves, and that's all detailed, those requirements, in EPD 903. Okay, so that's the minimum mandatory requirement, and then on top of that, anything that's needed additional for a particular procedure, that will be detailed in that procedure, and I'll show you an example of that a little bit later on. In fact, in the next slide. So in each of the procedures, there's 3 new sections now. First of all, there's a scope and application, which sort of describes exactly what the procedures for. Then there's a section 2, which is safety information, and if you remember, the warning symbol is used in the safety information, and that's pointing out a particular hazard or risk, so it's warning what the risks are. Then you've got mandatory requirements, which is the use of PPE, so that's the approved mandatory PPE, and then any additional PPE is detailed below. So in this case, the procedure needed use of a helmet, so that's detailed there. And then the next section was the preliminary operations, which refers back to section 1 of the manual. So that's everything you need to do in preparation before you carry out a procedure. And then you're into the normal procedure then that hasn't really changed at all in terms of content. So due to the new procedures at the front end of the manual, that's obviously changed all the numbering throughout all the procedures. As I mentioned before, improved style and format. So we'll see that throughout the manual, but also in addition, we've added notes where we can. They'll be in grey boxes. So that's just additional information, maybe a reference to something external, or something external to the document, that is. So that's just a bit of extra information. You'll see that all the distribution definitions are all in bold, so they're capitalised in bold, as they are in the distribution safety rules. And then we've added modernised drawings and forms, so they've all sort of been updated into a new modern standard. So just to stress that in the majority of 606 hasn't changed really. The word in the content is the same, but obviously the formatting and how it looks and the sort of numbering and the subsections have changed. So principally it's the same information, but with more at the front end in terms of what the procedures are, and the safety information. So that's the main sort of changes. Now there are some changes which I'm going to sort of come into now. The sort of changes that have been updated at the same time as modernising the manual. So procedure A10 has been updated. That's probably not something you would be involved with as sort of external companies. That's to do with live line tree cutting. So that's something that we do, in terms of the SQCR requirement. But what has changed, and it probably will be applicable to you, is the rest of the sort of updates. So procedure B4 and B11 is to do with LV cable identification. S15 has also been updated, and S10 has been withdrawn, and there's a new code of practice being created for operation instructions. And the other thing that's sort of changed is each section index didn't have an issue number, and now it does, and it's also got an amendment summary as well, which it didn't have before. So just looking at procedures B4 and B11. B11 is all the approved equipment for cable identification, HV and LV. And B11 is the sort of use of a LV cable identification in the presence of HV. So you're probably all familiar that for many years we've used a grumbler, Now that's sort of we can't purchase that anymore, and it's also becoming very difficult to repair. So it's effectively becoming obsolete. So we've worked for a couple of years now, sort of looking to identify alternative sort of methods to replace the Grumbler, and also trial alternative methods. And the one that sort of came out on top, and the one that's now approved, is the Mega CI. So we've now introduced that and added that into B11. Obviously the Grumbler is still in there. So there's two options. There's the Grumbler, if you did have one, and then there's the Mega CI, which is now, you know, the other alternative, which is approved. So you'll notice I mentioned about the use of graphics. So in the original one, it was all wordy. So we've added, you know, obviously the words that you know, for the Mega CI, but we've also included graphics, sort of to show you where to connect it, how the signal generator works, also what you would expect on the LEDs as you move the sensor along the cable and around the cable. So you can see graphically what you expect to see when you use it in practice. And also to support that, again, on the secure website, there will be a video that shows you how to use it as well. So we're trying to, you know, sort of tick quite a few boxes in terms of how to get that information across, in terms of words, graphics, and videos to support people to make sure things are used, you know, correctly. And then we're also going to be looking at the Mega CI in terms of seeing if we can use it to identify neutrals. So that's some further work that we're going to be working on. We're also trialling and potentially introducing at some point some single phase pole mounted reclosers. These are called trip savers, and what we've done in S15 is sort of added what the assigned ratings are, you know, for the trip saver, so people can understand, you know, how to use them and how to operate them as well. So, as I said before, S10 for operation instructions has been withdrawn, and there's a new code of practice 620. So that will have all the operational instructions on the secure site on the library, which you'll have access to. So any changes to operation instructions, newly issued, amended, or withdrawn, will be updated on that secure site, you know, pretty soon after they've been issued. So that's trying to keep things, you know, sort of a bit more real time. Okay, so just to summarise the main changes, it's the documents in a new style and format, which makes it sort of easier to read and understand. There's two new sections, 0 and 1, which I've gone through. 3 new sections in the front of each procedure, which relates around safety information. And then there's been updates to A10, B4, B11 and S15. And there's a new code of practice for operation instructions. 420 has been issued, and S10 has been withdrawn from 606. So that's the main summary of the changes. And then it's over to yourselves if you've got any questions. I may be able to answer them, you know, immediately. If we can't, we'll take them away and sort of come back to you if it needs a little bit more thought. Or okay, thank you very much.
I think at this point I'll just turn off the recording as well, so people can feel a bit more comfortable asking any questions they may have.